The 128th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been. There ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Oh, way to win it! 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with that. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul. Brown gets it into Williams. Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out to him. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. Carolina has won the national championship. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions. The Tar Heels are the national daggum champions.
And that's what it takes to win big time games. You got to compete. Do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services today. We've got a fun show today as we're going to hand out some season awards from the past 2019-20 basketball season. But first, Anthony, we're going to start discussing Cole Anthony. The freshman guard made an announcement last week that with the coronavirus basically making the world come to a complete stop, he is going to take some time to announce his decision on whether he's going to the NBA or going to return to Carolina for a sophomore campaign. And I guess what I wanted to ask you was, because I thought that was a wise and mature decision by the 18-year-old, do you think this leads more to him coming back next year if he's going to wait that long to make his decision?
I think it's definitely interesting. I understand that with COVID-19, there's a lot of people that are just kind of wanting to take things one day at a time because we don't know what the time scale is going to be. But I think it definitely lends well to the people that think that there's a chance that he could come back, because if he was so hell-bent on leaving, it doesn't really make any sense why he would just not go ahead and make the decision now. We're seeing plenty of guys that are already doing that. So I'm wondering if what he was hoping was that he could go and enter and go through the scouting combine, kind of get the evaluations from the different scouts about where he would go this year, and maybe just decide from there. Now, it looks almost certain at this point that there will not be a combine of any sort. If it is, it's going to be very, very late in the process, which would mean that there's no way they would be able to have it where you can go and then remove your name afterwards. It would probably be a couple of weeks, maybe even like the week before the draft, if they were to keep it on the same time scale, which, you know, is a totally different conversation for a different time. But I think that, yeah, when you look at it, it definitely, I think, gives people that want him back some hope that he could end up coming back next year. And it's going to be interesting if he does end up actually coming back, where he's going to fit into this team next year. Because, I mean, you got to look, 5-star point guard Caleb Love coming in, I don't think he's going to want to sit. And I think that the talent level is enough to where you're probably going to have to play him. So you're going to be losing Brandon Robinson, which is your 2-guard. Now, I mean, does that mean that Cole Anthony kicked over to the 2-guard if he returns? Is that automatic? Or do you just go with him as a more veteran point guard and have Caleb Love come off the bench? It's going to be interesting to see if he does come back, where he's going to fit in. There's still a lot of time to go, though. So it definitely is an interesting choice by Cole. But let's be honest, nothing has quite gone as planned for Cole Anthony, so it shouldn't be too shocking.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a conversation for him to return, because I'm with you. I think that if he was going to the NBA, he would have already said, look, I'm leaving. I remember when I got the notification on my phone that the basketball account retweeted his tweet, I thought that was him announcing his decision to leave, but it was just saying he's going to postpone his commitment. We talked to Brendan Marks a few weeks ago. He was very emphatic that there's no chance he returns. I wonder if I talk to him now if he maybe changes his tone, because he made that announcement he's going to postpone his decision. And we're also in the process of trying to get some NBA draft guys on here to talk about Cole Anthony's season, where his stock is compared to where it was in the preseason, and if it'd be smart for him to return, because there's a lot of area for him to grow as a player, and you'd prefer him to grow in college instead of having to grow in the NBA. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the main topic of the show. And that is that it is award season. The season is officially over. We had some time to reflect on a year that, albeit was still a down year, a very frustrating year, and at times was just hard to watch. But we were still exposed to some very great play individually and sometimes collectively as a team towards the end of the season. And the first award we're going to hand out is the MVP. We both had the same answer. This one was pretty obvious for me and for you, and I'll let you speak on it. It was Garrison Brooks. In the preseason, Garrison was the best-known commodity on the team, but that was because he was a good, solid defender individually and was going to rebound the ball at a pretty good rate. Nobody saw the offensive growth from him coming this year. And if they say they did, they're lying, unless one of the coaches say it, then they're not lying. But any fan that saw this, you're lying. And it went from, and this is, remember, before Cole Anthony got hurt, he was still not a primary option. The offense was running through Cole and even more Armando Bacot. Cole Anthony got hurt, and it was just a switch where we're just going to load the ball into him, and we're going to live and by what he does. Put up big games, 36 against Georgia Tech. He had 7 straight games with 20 or more to finish out the year at one point. And I mean, just a remarkable year. Led the ACC season in scoring at 18.8 points per game, 12 double-doubles. If Carolina would have been an All-American candidate and been a first-team All-ACC, no doubt, maybe even the ACC Player of the Year. But at 14 and 19, that gets overlooked because of the record. But he was by far this team's most valuable player.
Yeah, hands down. I think we definitely thought that there would be some improvement on the offensive end because we called for it in the preseason. I don't think that we saw this coming, though. He went from a guy that really was a role player as a starter, pretty much that fifth guy that was on the floor that everybody was just like, oh, yeah, and Garrison, to by the midpoint of this season, we reached the point where it was pretty much give the ball to Garrison and stand out and get out of the way. I remember, when we found out that he wasn't going to play against Louisville, we were pretty much just like, oh, yeah, chalk this up as a huge L because there's no way they're going to win this game without Garrison in there. And that's amazing to see that he's gone from being what he was just a year ago to being this guy that can take over games. And now it's looked at as coming into next year. Outside of whoever this Duke freshman is that they're going to be talking about all preseason and giving all the love to, he's probably the favorite to win ACC Player of the Year next year, right? That's what I'm thinking. I don't think anybody else really stands much of a chance in terms of a guy returning that looks the part ahead of Garrison. But, to go from a guy that last year was just not that, was there mainly for his defense, and now this year averaged, as you mentioned, 16.8 points per game, 18.8 in conference play. He had 11 conference games with 20 or more points. So when this team needed him to step up, he did. It wasn't his fault that nobody else could really step up and make shots when they needed to. He did everything that he possibly could. Games like Georgia Tech, where he literally willed the team back into a game that they were getting absolutely trampled in against an opponent that was not that good by any stretch of the imagination. Those are the types of games that you'll look back on from Garrison. And even though this season didn't go as planned, it's going to be one that you're going to remember. I mean, I think later on this offseason, we're probably going to do the most underappreciated players. I mean, Garrison Brooks is probably going to be on there just from this one season, because I agree with you. If he was on a team that probably finished even over 500, he probably would have been a first-team All-ACC player. His statistics definitely lined up with a guy that should have received that type of recognition, if not maybe even some All-American recognition, because he was really that good. And the thing that's great is that he's only got a chance to get better next year as he continues to sort of extend on what he did this year, sort of develop the range away from the basket, which I think is going to be key when he goes to the NBA. He's going to have to be able to do that. But yeah, I mean, it's just a phenomenal performance and a guy that definitely deserves this honor. And I wouldn't be shocked if he comes back if he wins this again next year.
Yeah, I mean, by the end of the year, his name was being put in the same breath as Tyler Hansbrough in terms of what his production was on the court. And when your name's being put up there with a guy that I believe the best player to ever play at Carolina in college, you're doing something spectacular. So we'll move on to the most improved, and this was pretty easy too. It was Garrison Brooks. For basically everything that we just said about his MVP award, it goes to the most improved. The growth of his offensive game was beautiful to watch if you're a basketball fan, because he developed a complete back to the basket game with an array of moves that he was able to get the ball in the bucket. He developed a face-up game, and at one point even was taking and making three-pointers. And that's something that I think when we were entering the year, and if we had to have a preseason award, Brandon Robinson might have been the guy that we would expect to get this award, because he was moving from the bench to the starting role, and you would just kind of expect him to be naturally a lot better. But Garrison Brooks took that award away from him. While Bacot was kind of struggling to adjust to game or the college game, Garrison Brooks was just putting up monster games after monster games, willing this team to wins or keeping them in games that they lost. His points per game jumped up almost 9 points. His rebounds went up by almost 3. So his statistics improved from his sophomore to junior year again. And so this was really a no-brainer, as he kind of looked like a guy that Carolina could, and especially next year, be the focal point of an offense, which is something we never thought when Garrison Brooks first committed, and especially didn't think that after his first 2 years on campus.
Well, there was definitely a case for Brandon Robinson. I mean, especially as the year went along, he became a guy that was the most reliable perimeter shooter on this team. Had a pretty solid year defensively as well. And really just the other thing about Brandon Robinson that we have to recognize is the fact that he went through multiple injuries this year. Don't ever think that right ankle was ever fully healed. I mean, he re-injured it so many times, it's not even funny, but he fought through it and played great. But yeah, you're right. Garrison Brooks, I mean, to go from, last year, he was a guy that was, like we talked about, on the floor for his defense. I mean, he barely averaged over 7 points a game this year. And like you mentioned, an 8.9 point per game improvement from 2018-19 to this year. And then his rebounds go from 5.6 to 8.5 per game. Now, he was playing more this year, but that's still he was still playing a lot last year. The amount of improvement is not something that can just be attributed to his minutes on the floor. You talked about him hitting the three-pointers, but the other thing that I think was huge that a lot of people don't realize is that Garrison Brooks actually had a better year according to defensive efficiency rating than he did a year ago. And he improved by 6.3 percentage points, or however you would quantify whatever the rankings are for defensive efficiency. So even in a year where we thought there were times where he really didn't play well defensively, he was still one of these teams' best defenders. And I mean, it's hard to criticize really anything that Garrison did this year, because if he wasn't out there, this team probably would have been lucky to win 8 games. This probably would have been the worst team in Carolina history by a long shot. So having Garrison Brooks is out there was just a blessing. And as I mentioned, it only feels like he's going to get better as we go along, because coming into next year, I mean, yeah, this is going to be a team that we feel like is going to have a lot more talent, but they're also going to be young and